Hey everybody, welcome back to Cityscape Brewing. I'm Dennis Fields. Today we're talking cold crashing, specifically how to protect your beer from suckback, meaning oxygen getting into your fermenter while you're cold crashing a beer. So I posted a video a little while ago using this product called a Cold Crash Guardian. And it essentially is a bladder plastic bag that fills up with CO2 when you plug this side into your fermenter. And then when you go to cold crash it, you have a bunch of CO2 that will suck back into your fermenter and prevent oxygen from getting in there when the vacuum happens as the beer cools down, right? Well, I will have this posted in the video description below as far as where you can get one of these, but several of you posted that you couldn't get these where you live because you're outside the United States. And I was sitting here looking at this and I said, you know, these are fairly common items that you could get at a home improvement store, or you may even have laying around at your house as part of your home brew supplies. So I'm going to show you how to make a DIY cold crash protector after this. Grab yourself a beer, hit that like and subscribe button, and stay tuned. All right, let's first talk about the equipment that you will need in order to build your own DIY cold crash protector. First, you're gonna need some vinyl tubing. This is 3/8 inch size. You're gonna need a little bit of this, probably about, I'd say about 3 feet would probably be enough for this. You're also going to need some type of a spigot. A lot of you have these things laying around, or you use them on your bottling buckets. Maybe you've already gone to kegging and you no longer need one off your bottling bucket, or they're super easy to find at your homebrew supply store. I'll also have the link to everything we're talking about in links in the video description below, so you can just go online and purchase these, have them come right to your house. So this style and this style, although they're a little bit different, they're almost essentially the same thing. They both have threaded portions that go into your bucket, and they both have a connection onto 3/8 tubing. In this case, this one has like a barbed connection, this one has just a slip connection on there. But they both have a valve that you turn on and off, and a little release tablet. So you're gonna, or a little release hole in the inside on the one side for pressure. So go ahead and find one of these things. I'm sure you have one laying around your house. You're also going to need some sort of a bladder like this one. Well, they sell these things online. They're called collapsible water tanks or water bottles, and they're flat. They're just like this one. They're essentially the same thing. They come with caps for the top of these things, and they screw right on. You'd fill these up with some type of a liquid, and you can carry them this way. In this case, it will also hold our CO2, even though there's very little pressure coming out of there. This thing's rated for like so many pounds of pressure, way over what our fermenter is going to produce. So go ahead and get a couple of these, or you might have one laying around because you got a to-go order sometime. So this one specifically is from Kentucky Fried Chicken. I actually use this on my boat. I put like drinks in it, and that way I don't have to have glass or something on my boat. But this one you can just pour out. So if you get a to-go place and they have these type of containers, you put, you know, sweet tea or whatever, iced tea or something inside of this lemonade, you might have gotten one of these things to go. They're also the exact same thing, and this one actually comes with a little bit larger lid than the ones that you can buy online. So this is about a half gallon. These are about 2 gallons worth of volume. The half gallon will work just fine because the amount of suck back that your fermenter has is very little. The half gallon will have plenty of CO2 that will pull back into the fermenter, and you'll still have some left over even in the smaller size. So you may even have one of these things laying around. The only other thing that you will need is a couple of fittings for 3/8 size tubing, and that is an elbow like this one here and a T like this one here. And so those are the only few things that you might need to get from the store. The only thing that I had trouble finding at a home improvement store was a check valve, and the check valve looks like this here. This is a one-way check valve. This allows for oxygen, or in this case CO2, to go one direction but not the other, and so this prevents the suck back coming through this other hose. So looking at the original Cold Crash Guardian here, there's a tube that goes into some sanitizer, or I mean in this case it wouldn't suck back oxygen anyway, but I just put it in sanitizer anyway. It also then will push CO2, once this bag fills up, push CO2 through the one-way check valve here into your CO2 but won't allow, as it's crashing, to come back through the tube, and therefore it's gonna pull that CO2 out of the bag here. So you'll need one of those. These are like a couple of bucks on Amazon. So I'll have a link for that in the video description. You can go check one of these things out. That's super easy. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna put one of these things together so I can show you how it all fits together. And then we're gonna talk about a way that you may need to modify a cap in order to get your spigot to fit, which I'll show you very easy for a couple of dollars worth of some PVC equipment. All right, so here is what we have so far. We have our PVC vinyl tubing cut into sections, and I'll have what these section lengths should be in the video description below, but these are kind of variable. You can make them as long or as short as you want to. This piece here is optionally could just go right into a bung in your fermenter, or you could have a piece of attachment like this and then have a different attachment on the bottom depending on if you use a rubber bung or if it's going into the O-ring of a bucket or if it's going into the top of a different carboy. And so that's kind of optionally depending on what you use, how you would make this connection here. This part goes to your fermenter. Then the next thing you would do is you would go through this 3/8 elbow and then the T here, and then you'd have a connection that will ultimately go to your spigot and your cap, which we'll talk about next. And then the other section goes to your one-way check valve, which is right here. The one-way check valve does have an arrow on it. You may be able to see that here. It does have an arrow showing the direction of which way this flow will happen. In this case, the area where it's coming from is on the bigger side here, and then where it's going, where it's outletting is the smaller end, so that would go through. So if you're getting the same one that I have in the link description, that's how you would face it there. And then you would have a length of tubing. Again, this is optional depending on how long it is until it gets into a, in my case, I use a mason jar full of sanitizer, but this could just be as long as you need it to be to outlet the excess gas once you have it connected. The cap is the kind of the trickiest part of this. Depending on what size of bag that you're using, you'll have two different size caps, and you can see I've already drilled a hole in that, and we'll talk about that in a second, but the two caps are a little bit different. This one here, you don't really need to do any type of modification for other than drilling the hole, which we'll talk about in a second, but it will fit the spigot like this in it just fine. The trouble with the smaller one is the size of the nut that's on the back of these spigots doesn't allow, as you screw this in, and I'll just show you quick, if you take these O-rings off, rubber gaskets. Again, this one is broken, so this is just an extra one I have. But once you put this thing through and you were to thread this on, it doesn't leave enough room around the nut to have the actual container screw on it. So although it fits and it looks like it would work, when you try to go screw on your thing, it doesn't fit because the nut is larger. Now, could you modify this nut and shave all these little star portions down? You could, you can definitely do that. So that's an option as well. But what I found is just a couple of very easy to find parts at like a home improvement store solves this problem. So let me show you what I did. So first, no matter which cap that you're using, you're gonna need to drill a hole. And again, you can make yours look a little prettier than mine here, but you'll either need to do that with a 1-inch spade bit like this one here, or you'll use kind of a hole bit like this one. Either one will drill a hole into this. Again, you can make it look pretty or you can clean it up. This one I just did really quickly. So if you're using the smaller caps like I am here that I have in the link description below, what you'll want to do is go to the store and buy a couple of different adapters. One of these things could be a bushing, or this one's a cap. We're gonna drill a hole in there. We'll do that in a second. And then another one is a 3/4 inch to 3/4 inch threaded adapter. Again, I'll have this in the link description, but threaded on both sides to basically join this piece with your spigot, right? And so I'll show you how this all fits together. First, we're gonna drill a hole in the back of this nut. And this is only really to let the CO2 through. So it really doesn't matter what the size of this is. I wouldn't go like super small, but I'm gonna go ahead and drill a hole in the back of this thing just to let the CO2 flow through this piece. All right, so we're gonna take our drill and we're just gonna drill right in the center, starting slow so we can get a little pilot going. May need a, no, I didn't need to. You may need a pliers to hold onto that so it doesn't spin, but it drills out pretty easily. And so really we're just looking for this, like a hole in the middle to let the CO2, it doesn't need to be very large at all. So that's done. And now it's time to assemble all of this stuff. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and take our one cap that we just drilled the hole into, and we're gonna put it actually in the inside. And so this should fit. There's a little ring, it's kind of hard to see. There's a little ring on the inside of this cap that this will fit perfectly right inside of. And so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put that right inside. That's gonna allow this thing to screw on once we get the bag put on there. Then I'm going to put one of these washers from your spigot on there, right? So we should have a bunch of these things laying around. We're gonna go ahead, this one's a rubber one, that one's got, these are kind of more plasticky. So I'm gonna put this one just so it creates a good seal where we drilled that hole, right? So we're gonna have to go ahead and do that. You can also optionally do that kind of in the inside as well. And I would recommend using some Teflon tape or even some gas CO2 tape. They use this for natural gas in houses. It's the yellow kind, but you can also use the white. I mean, this isn't that important. Then what I would do after that is screw on either this, if you can get it all the way down to the cap, but you want this to be tight. In this case, this one doesn't go all the way down to the cap. So what I'm gonna do is actually take my nut and I'm gonna put it on this and tighten this down all the way down to the cap so it's nice and tight. And you may need to grab something on the inside and tighten that down. Then I'm going to take, again, I'll have Teflon tape on this if I was doing this to actually use. I'm just demonstrating, so I didn't put the Teflon tape on here. But then I would go ahead and then screw this connection adapter on and screw that on tight. Again, this is plastic, so you don't want to go super tight where you'd break something, but this should be all nice and snug then, right? Now we have a way for our CO2 to get all the way through from our tubing into our spigot into the bag, right? Then we take our spigot, no matter which one you're using, and at this point it really doesn't matter. You'd put another washer that you would have that comes with these, and you'd put that on. You usually have two because they have one on the inside of the bucket, one on the outside of the bucket. That way you have one here and one here for a nice tight seal. Again, using some other Teflon tape in there will also help create a tight seal. So you'll go ahead and tighten that down. Now this piece adapted works the same as our original Cold Crash Guardian. It looks like this one. It's a little bit different cap. I did try and I did find these caps, but they don't fit specifically on the bag that I have here, and so I didn't want someone to be able to purchase this and then all of a sudden the threading doesn't fit right on these and you have to adapt them. But if you can find something like this, this would also work. It's just a different type of spigot that will fit on one of those bags. But this, in a pinch, I know all of these items work, so therefore that's why I'm putting them in the link description. So then you should be able to go ahead with our DIY one and screw this right on to the bag. And there we go. Voila. So it's a little bit bulkier, but it's going to do the exact same thing. Then you'll make your connection to your tubing that we just did by connecting this to the 3/8 barb. All right, so next let's talk about how I would use this and how I would hook this up, right? So this is flat. There's probably a little tiny bit of oxygen that's in the top part of this thing. Not a huge deal, but I'll tell you how to get that out as we're using it on a fermenter, right? So as your beer is brewing, you're going to want to, during some point, when you're sure that it's not going to need a blow-off tube or something like that, towards the end of fermentation is probably the best, when you start getting down to like 10:25, 10:20, something like that, and you're starting to finish up your beer. This doesn't take very long to fill up this whole bag. You'll find that a couple of hours and this thing's going to be really ballooned out. And so what I would do is I would hook this, and we talked about that before, either right into a bung here or using a different piece of tubing and finding a way to get that connected to your bucket. And then what I would do is, and just for the sake of, this one's a little more see-through than this valve, there are 3 different positions for one of these valves for your spigot. And so there is an open, which is all the way open. There's a larger hole. It's kind of hard to see. It's transparent. It's an oblong hole that's in the middle of this. And that, when you open it all the way, is open to the inside. This is where your bladder is going to be, right? So that's going to allow any pressure from your CO2, in this case it would be just like this, any pressure that's coming from your fermenter in through your valve and fill up this bag, right, with CO2. As it's full, you can actually shut it back off, and off is completely straight, right? It is not all the way this way, and we're going to explain why, right? So it's up and down like this, not all the way this way. This is open, right? It's this way. And the reason is because there's a little hole right here that will allow a little bit of excess bleeding when that oblong bigger hole in the inside goes over the top of it the opposite direction. So this is off, this is open, and this is bleeding a little bit of air or oxygen or CO2 out of it as it's sitting there. So once this bag is full in your fermenter, the way you would bleed that oxygen out of here is you would actually tip it up a little bit like this, if you can. I mean, if there's long enough room or enough room in your fermentation chamber. So the oxygen comes up. Oxygen is lighter than CO2, and so the CO2 will go to the bottom. The oxygen will come up to this hole. And then what you would do is you would open this to the kind of bleed position where you would just kind of let a little bit bleed out this hole, not the full open position. And then you would kind of press a little very gently until some of this oxygen starts coming out of this little check valve or this little valve here. And once you're satisfied you've got enough volume out where all of the oxygen that's sitting at the top is out, you go ahead and you can close that off again. Now, from the fermentation process, all of this here was pushing CO2 into the bag, right? All of your oxygen that you had is now bled out through this little hole, and it is full and closed. And again, the excess is pushing out any of that oxygen back out of your fermenter until it's done. Then when you're completely done with the fermentation, and you're ready to start cooling down, and I do this specifically for hazy IPAs in general, is I then turn my fermentation chamber down to as close to freezing as possible, so somewhere in the mid-30s. And then as this cools down, and I kind of step it down so I don't cold crash it completely all at one point. I'll do 10 degrees and then another 10 degrees and another 10 degrees and kind of step it down. But as the wort cools, there will be, as the headspace will kind of create a vacuum. And during the cooling process, you want to turn this to all the way open, so that way the oblong piece is towards your bag, and then this will then suck the CO2 out of the bag, and it'll suck it into your fermenter this way. And so any excess CO2 and any pressure that your fermenter is creating will suck back through all that CO2, go right into your fermenter instead of any oxygen. Once it's down to that level and there's no more suck back going to happen, you can go ahead and you can just close this off again, right? And so then you won't have any, then you're really just airlocking everything until you're ready to transfer it to your keg. And so you really, if you put this on before fermentation completes, you don't ever have to expose it open air in any way, shape, or form to the outside elements. You're always going to have it closed in this system at some point. This is a great way to make your own cold crash protector at home for just a few bucks. All right, there you have it, DIY cold crash protector. So you can go ahead and you can make one of these things for yourself. Again, super cheap. Everything that I've listed here is just a few dollars. You should probably be able to do the whole setup depending on how much you have actually laying around your house for maybe even under $10, 15 bucks at the max. And then you have your own cold crash protector. It also comes with a couple of extra bags, and so you can use those for whatever you want, or if this thing ends up getting wrecked, you'll have an extra backup bladder as well. So kind of worth the extra purchase, in my opinion, in order to make one yourself. So let me know if you have any questions in the video description below. Happy to help out. That's what this channel is all about, making you guys a better brewer. So with that, hit that like and subscribe button, and until next time, happy brewing. Thanks for watching my video. I really do appreciate it. Another couple ways that you can help support the channel is by hitting that like and subscribe button. You can also check out the merchandise in our store. I have other shirts, we got glassware, we got stickers, hats, sweatshirts, etc. Go check it out. Also, hit that video here, you know you want to.